All right. Well, we'll jump right in. There's a lot to cover. Um, and I think most people are interested in the international piece, the how to exit the United States piece. So I put that first. And then anyone who wants to stay and talk about the Charles v. Salazar, more than welcome. And typically for if this is your first legal queer and A, we will go through the topic that we're speaking about that particular week, and then at the end take any and all questions, not necessarily about the topic, but maybe it's marriage equality, maybe it's adoption, maybe it's a name change, or maybe it's a landlord-tenant issue that you have, whatever it is, right? The legal queer and A is totally up for you, but and your time. But for this topic, I'll stop in the middle when I'm done with the international relocation expatriation piece, and then have questions, and then jump into Charles v. Salazar. And typically they're an hour, but I am open to staying longer. Hold on a second. All right, so housekeeping. Mute your mic. A lot of people on the Zoom, so staying muted is very helpful. Always say, please be kind and respectful, but we just always are as a community, so it feels redundant to say so, but just in case. The next official legal queer and A is Tuesday, October 28th. And then the topic for today, and actually switched this around as well for this particular day and talked more about the how to make the move first, then jump into the countries. So who I am, most of you know who I am. I'm an estate planning attorney, LGBTQ specific. Also have an expertise and have spoken to a lot of trade association and financial advisors around international macro LGBTQ cross-border estate planning, right? Because for decades we tend not to have children. We're more mobile and global. We tend to, even prior to the shit showness of the world in which we live, have traveled in multiple countries and lived in multiple countries. Founded my law firm, also LGBTQ Pride Planning, and my nonprofit, the Caravan of Hope, which I hope to take out in the next couple of months. But it's an RV where I drive cross country, 5,000 miles, 14 cities, and provide pro bono legal services to LGBTQ folks in rural and underserved areas. In the midst of filming, it's not out yet, it'll drop around Christmas, but a podcast called Table in the Back with the former mayor, Jim Kenney, in Philadelphia, where we exactly what it sounds like. My marketing is always very simple. It's a table in the back of a restaurant at the guest's favorite place, and we sit and talk about real things. And then prior to doing what I did. So we always start with an estate planning tip before we dive into whatever topic it is. So this one I decided to tie together. As I alluded to earlier, I've been doing international LGBTQ estate planning since I started because we tend to travel and move and or own homes in other countries. So estate planning does not travel with you. In other words, your US-based plan, you have to have, this is the first time in US history where folks with 401ks and homes and all the things are leaving indefinitely, right? Very quickly and for no other reason than the political climate. So it's important to know that your US-based documents, and especially your trust, will govern your US foothold. But then when you figure out where you're going to be permanently, if it is permanent, so there's a little bit of a bridge where your US documents may be valid in the jurisdiction in which you find yourself. But then once you decide if you're going to be a permanent resident and or citizen, then that switches things. And then you would have two estate plans. We have to figure out how the two talk. So very, very important. I have a client in Sweden. He actually ended up in Denmark, but he worked for IKEA. And right after the election, put in for a transfer, ended up in Sweden, and then preferred Denmark over Sweden. So then he's in Denmark and just met with the counterpart of me in Denmark over there. And even though we signed his documents 12 years ago, we have to re-sign his estate planning documents on the same day he signs his Danish documents, but prior in time. So his meeting's at 11 a.m. on October 26th, I believe, and he has to sign the US-based documents right before, then the Danish ones, and that's how they're going to work symbiotically. I've never seen that out of all the countries I've dealt with. So I always say, go where you want to go, and then we can work backwards from there. Make sure that your relationship, you and or chosen family are protected where you're moving. And that may mean, again, powers of attorney, medical directives, the travel documents, and then be very careful about your money trail. In the last week's Legal Queer, and I said we'd be talking about crypto and USDC and safe ways to put money in the cloud, where that you can then access from anywhere. I'm going to do an entire legal queer on cryptocurrency. I call it cryptocurrency because I gay up everything. But I didn't want to just jump into USDC and all of these, terms and expect that people who aren't as into crypto as I am would know. So I'll do just sort of a basic crypto 101 and then how it can be very helpful with your moving abroad. So then these are the 9 documents. And again, in other countries, they would differ. The combinations would differ, but important both here in the US and abroad that you mind the estate planning piece and how, especially the countries that I've chosen, except for the one that I'm moving to, but there are reasons, have marriage equality. And so again, knowing exactly where you're moving, the rights that you have, and being cognizant of it. All right, so I'm going to start with the conventional sort of moderate cost paths and then go into the budget unconventional unique ways. So first and foremost, a digital nomad visa, remote worker visa. So many countries have these. I mean, it's up to close to 100 countries have, but not everybody does something for a living that fits into this. But even though I'm an attorney and I'm here, if I could find a way to be there and run my law firm from there, so you don't have to just think of when COVID happened, I moved to San Diego and I lived in San Diego for over a year and a half and I moved back and I flew back and forth. So you don't necessarily have to digital, people think tech, web designer, SEO, things like that. It could just be that what you do remotely. The downside, and many countries offer these, but the downside is it is a medium cost. In other words, it's not a budget type cost. You need a stable income. So if you do have a client base and or, an employer, but you need to be able to verify and show a stable income, and it doesn't always lead to permanent residency. Work visa, skilled immigration. This is obviously harder. You have to have a skill that a country wants you to have. And so that's the downside. You need to satisfy the job market and the demand and the sponsorship requirements of the country that you're looking at. So one way to look at this, well, actually, there's 2 ways to look at it, and it really depends on you, the assets that you have, the skills that you have. You can either choose a country or countries and figure out how you're going to make that happen, or figure out which of these skills and which of these buckets and which of these things interest you, and then which countries are there, and then choose based on that, even though you never saw yourself in Estonia, which is a pretty awesome country, right? So, but until you start looking into it, you may never have thought that that would be an option for you. Long-term residence visas, but without investment. Okay, so yes, it's without the $500,000 golden visa piece, but you still have to maintain a minimum threshold of income, health, and insurance. That's why I have this on the moderate cost path and on the conventional. So there are ways, and again, several countries, good ones, Panama, Spain, Costa Rica, and we'll delve deeper into those. But where, again, you can get a visa long-term, up to a year, 6 months, but as long as you can maintain a minimum threshold in the bank account and health insurance. They don't want you to get injured, could have all the money in the world, and then you deplete their government systems on health insurance. These are starting to go away quickly. I know even on October 22nd, I believe Spain's is going away, but this ancestry, family, and partner route. So this, everyone's heard of Italy. How many of us here have some sort of Italian heritage, Giampolo, if it followed the paternal route, which mine did, my father, if I had gone through the rigmarole years ago, I would have been able to eventually, it takes time, year and a half, sometimes 2 years. But now this is going away, but there are still some countries that have it, but obviously the downside is highly contingent on your personal genealogy, right? And so do you want to be like, I have someone that's doing this now for Hungary and they have no desire to end up in Hungary, but they're doing it for Hungary because then that will give them the visa travel and ability to go elsewhere. Student visas. So we'll talk about this in two ways. I also have it in the budget, unconventional route, but it also fits in this sort of conventional moderate route as well. But I have a client. She signed her documents a couple of weeks ago. Retired physician. Her wife's a therapist. She can work. The wife can work remotely, and the retired doctor is going to go back to school and become, not become a doctor, but just enroll in university in Canada and continue schooling that way. So it's an option, but there's the 4-year university route, which is obviously much more expensive. You'll either need to pay for it, get a scholarship, not always cheap, but it's a legitimate path. And then sometimes, depending on which country you're in, allows you also for part-time work. And you're there for a significant amount of time. So if there's something that you've been wanting to do, learn, change, a career transition, this is an awesome, easy way, to be in another country as soon as you want. And then long tourist stays. So there's one country in particular, Albania, that allows for this. You just book a ticket, and you could stay for up to a year in Albania with no questions asked. And then Albania is really close to a lot of other countries, so I view it as a bridge country. It's not the most LGBTQ friendly. It's absolutely gorgeous. They call it the French Riviera, the poor man's French Riviera. Absolutely gorgeous, super inexpensive, but not super LGBTQ friendly. Colombia allows for 6 months. Cartagena, Medellin, there are a lot of amazing LGBTQ friendly cities. And that's another thing is don't necessarily disqualify a country. You really have to look at cities, because a city in and of itself will provide more protections and a certain way of life than, let's say Albania makes you think mentally, what you think of Albania or what you think of Colombia. But then when you're in Cartagena and the queer scene, so it's very important as you think about where you want to go to not necessarily just disqualify a country, but to really be city focused and where you're going to live. So some non-conventional ultra budget tactics. So house sitting, caretaking. Think about the flip of what Parisian au pairs have been doing for decades to come here. And now we're going to start doing that anywhere that you would want. And again, this is somewhat about city, picking cities, but not just the city, but think of not as large of a city. So Valencia instead of Barcelona, you'll cut your cost of living in nearly half. Again, the ancestry and family takes the longest, often the cheapest path to European rights. Perpetual traveler visa run strategy. Very risky. You need to be careful if you do this, but there are folks who do this, and you stay as long as you're allowed to stay in that particular country, and it's a very nomadic life. And so let's say you do Colombia for 6 months, then you do Albania for a year, then you know that Spain gives you 6 months, and then you just keep country hopping, visa run, and declare residency in all of these places. You stay long enough to become a resident, but never permanent. So risks involve, it's going to be very hard to work the whole time that you're there. If you're not careful and if you're like going right up against the deadline, you could hit an overstay ban. Tax confusion, especially if you do choose to work. So only recommended to use as a temporary tactic, not your overall plan moving forward. But again, if you wanted to leave tomorrow, you could book a flight to Albania, low tickets, and then just once you're in that area, super inexpensive to fly in between countries, and you could do that perpetually. But again, I don't recommend it as a plan. Volunteer exchange or work for room and board. So again, this would be places that are unconventional, hostels, guest houses, farms, in exchange for lodging, being able to work abroad. And then the studying piece, this from an unconventional, the short-term language study abroad courses. So instead of the doctor who is going to go back to school and enter into a 4-year university, you can instead do a short-term, part-time study abroad, or not so much study abroad, but a language school and get all the visa rights that someone who is in a 4-year university gets you. So I did some research, and also all throughout here, like Nomad Capitalist, as I was doing research, if I found links to it, I added it. So when we send you this, all the links should be active and you'll be able to go right to it. But I also did research on the two, in my opinion, most unconventional, inexpensive routes. And I'll put this in a Word document and then also share it with you. But so for short-term language study abroad courses, we have Spain, Uruguay, average cost $1,000 for a year, 1,000 to 3,000 a year in Uruguay. Cost of living is as low as 350 to 450 a month. And Uruguay is beautiful. Just look up some photos. Spain, the courses can run 200 euros per week. An example of a 12-week course could be anywhere from 1,800 euros to 2,000. But again, that gets you there. And then once you're there, so you're balancing the reduced tuition of the short-term program versus a full 4-year degree, especially if you're only doing it in order to get out of here and get a foothold somewhere else. Places like Uruguay have a lot lower cost of living. You get your legal foothold. That's a whole point of this, is the legal foothold. Each of these options gives you a unique legal foothold in the country. And once you're there, then you utilize and capitalize on your legal foothold in that country. It allows you to test an environment. So you do an $1,800, year-long course in Spain, and then you do a 6-month one in Uruguay. But it allows you, without, all these folks that are spending $500,000 to get a golden visa in Portugal, but don't really know if they like living in Portugal. It's like you've spent a lot of money on one country. Right. And it's just, to me, I'd much prefer, and why I've chosen Curacao as a country that I would go to, is then once you become a Dutch citizen, you have a visa-free travel to 174 countries. I'd much rather that than picking absent-minded, just because Portugal is a well-known country in Spain, and the ones that most people are choosing right now. So it allows you to test the environment, which I think is really, really helpful. And then from there, pivot if you don't like it. And then caveats to watch out for. Doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get full work rights, but if nothing else, you'll have learned the language, which you won't if you don't get a hold of the language in the country in which you're living. So I feel like it just makes sense as a good transition way to get there. You'll need to satisfy afterwards. You'll need to satisfy the income and the health insurance and all of the thresholds once you're no longer a student. So as long as you have the vision of what you're going to be doing after the student piece, and then ensure that the school that you're going to is credited and recognized, and that your student visa that they say that you'll have will in fact be valid. So a lot of the research I did, a lot of institutions are promoting this right now as a way to entice folks to come, and their programs are not necessarily legit. All right, one of my favorite, I did a lot of research on this. I never ever, until I did this legal Q&A, even knew about this as far as an international component and a way for folks to live somewhere internationally, but intentional co-op communities all over the world. And they have very, very, very minimal membership costs. So you join the community. It's not like these ones this one here, this Greek villa co-housing, absolutely gorgeous in Greece. And I think the membership is something like 50 or 80 euros a month or something like that. Like super, super inexpensive. You live in an intentional community, sometimes based on either ecological principles or some sort of values and beliefs. So the big benefits to these types of communities is it will bring with it an invitation and sponsorship letter. They've invited you to be a part of their community in this particular country. So they'll often, you have to ask, but they'll often write you a invitation and sponsorship letter. There's structured volunteer programs and or work programs. So you could potentially get a work permit while you're there. course certificates and training. So a lot of the communities that I looked up will then offer folks either language school or other types of trainings and programs. Employment offers, whether pay in kind and barter, but definitely an opportunity and way to make money while you're there. Local legal advocate or legal sponsor. So a lot of the communities know that this is your way into the community, and so they have a legal advocate and or legal sponsor to then help you make that transition. And then of course it's a temporary buffer stay, a very nice temporary buffer stay while you figure out what you're going to do. So makes, in my opinion, these. So yeah, so how do you find them? First, you got to vet them, right? And it's also important to know that this doesn't replace the visa requirement. So it gets you there, reduces costs, provides safety, gives you a community, but it will not replace the legal component that you then have to do after that, hence the legal advocate and the legal sponsor. But again, as far as vetting them, and I came up with a big list. Let me see some of the countries with contact information and all of the things. Let me see. Uruguay, Mexico, Portugal, Spain, Greece, San Fran, because that's kind of like a different country. Australia, Tasmania in particular, Denmark, India, and Scotland were the ones that, as far as LGBTQ specific goes. All right, so I think, I mean, to me, this is awesome. And again, ideal community because it provides you a formal invitation hosting letter that you use in your visa app, volunteer membership agreement, the ability to work, documentation support, and a safety net. So let me see, what else would I talk about on this? Things to ask if you are going to reach out to some of the ones that I found. Very, very important that they give you minimally this. So the overarching reason why I think this is an amazing relocation strategy is because it provides these aspects that you need in order to then become a permanent resident and or citizen. So do you provide a formal invitation or hosting letter? Do you have a structured volunteer work program? Can you provide a written contract for employment if you do, right? So I have all of this written down in the Word doc that we'll create a Google Doc and share it, but just some things to consider and ask folks if you're actually looking. If just one person through all of this actually leaves this country because of today, then it'll be awesome. So, at the end of the day, again, everybody's looking at different countries for different reasons, but and then strategies generally just to make a move relatively inexpensive, minimize possessions, right? Take very little with you. The cost of moving stuff is a lot. So as you relocate, just make it as minimal as possible. Choosing a place with low cost of living, again, that Valencia versus Barcelona option, just be aware. And then this I recommend for anybody is don't choose a permanent place right away and rent something or buy something from afar. There's absolutely, like, get an Airbnb in Valencia, get an Airbnb in Barcelona, go to Madrid, hop around. It's expensive at first, but in the long run, you will have saved, from a lot of people's experience, I can tell you, you will have saved not just thousands of dollars in the long run, but you will be happier because you will have vetted multiple locations. Okay, so just in general, that peace of mind that you've vetted multiple locations and you love where you're living. Because the idea here is, right, life is short. Life is short. Things are not great here. We deserve to live a fulfilling life. And so don't peace out and make the decision quickly and haphazardly. Take your time and find a place that you love. and that is truly fulfilling to the way of life. You get to craft a new way of life ultimately if you're going to do this. And so really taking the time to do just that. I always say there are two things, and both require privilege, but there are two things that if everybody could do will go a long way towards our mental health with where we are right now. And that is choose who we work for, or work for someone or a company that sees us, right? And then secondly, live somewhere that sees us, acknowledges us, both from a legal and political standpoint. So where you live and who you work for will go a long, long way. Not everybody has the privilege to change those things, but these are some relatively inexpensive ways to at least be able to change the where you live piece. Barter, exchange, leverage local markets. Another reason why a short-term study, language study program, in my opinion, makes it most sense. Even if it's not the way that you go, if you go an intentional co-op community way, and then you take language courses while you're there, but you will not be able to use barter and leverage local markets if you don't speak the language, if you're moving somewhere where the language is different. So very, very, very helpful to be able to get by when you know the language. Get creative on the timing of your visa, overlapping tourist days, not, the coming back and forth and all of the things, being very intentional around extensions, local permits, all the things. You can save thousands and thousands of dollars. And then these are super rare, but they do exist. Incentive relocation programs. So certain, again, small towns, regions, you have to be okay with where they are, give people tax benefits in order to relocate. Income, so building freelance or remote income before you move. So having that financial cushion. Again, I alluded to this earlier, but know the local language allows you to network locally and then gives you access to better local opportunities. I have a lot of friends in Costa Rica and other Spanish-speaking countries, and when they speak the language, being able to get that awesome apartment for the local rate because they speak the language and they're at the local bars and they're at the local restaurants and they're not hanging at the expat bars only speaking. A lot of folks have gotten where, people think Costa Rica is super expensive, but there are amazing, amazing, amazing inexpensive opportunities, but you have to be able to be in the community in order to gain access to those and meet the folks who know about those opportunities. And then timing the move, simple, but actually looking at the year and picking the off season and moving during that time, those Airbnbs will be less expensive. Everything will be less expensive. All right, so we'll jump into the countries. So Mexico, no investment. You need to be able to be a temporary resident. You need to be able to show, on average, it really depends. Count locality, they call it, locality by locality, exactly how much, but ranges between 4,000 a month, 60 to 70,000 a year. Merida right now is a city that a lot of folks are going to in the Yucatan. Puerto Vallarta and some other cities are well known, but in terms of low cost of living and very queer friendly, Merida is an awesome city that a lot of, even since the election, my clients are moving to. And so you sort of solve rather the economic visa requirement, but you do need to show economic solvency in order to move there. Argentina, live first, legalize later. This is a great place for the language study courses. And as far as the why, marriage equality since 2010, marriage equality since 2022 in Mexico. And so Argentina, super, super queer friendly and protective, has had 3 genders on all of their government IDs for like 5 to 7 years now. I'd say, so super, super queer friendly, marriage equality for over 15 years. But again, student visas or rentista income routes allow you to live there, super inexpensive, enrolling in one of those short-term study programs, and then figuring out the bridge from there. Uruguay, awesome, awesome country, super low cost of living, very protective on LGBTQ rights, marriage equality since 2013. Again, legal gender recognition, super stable economy, really goes unnoticed, in my opinion. You only need to show, still need to show some sort of solvency, but only 1,500 a month, as opposed to the 4,000 and some of these higher income thresholds. And again, really modest cost of living as well, and absolutely beautiful. Costa Rica, this one you would get in through a digital nomad. So super cheap and simple, but as long as you can work remotely in some way, shape, or form. Solid LGBTQ scene, anywhere from 300 a month for an individual, 3,000 rather, as far as income, to 4,000. Health insurance is a must, and you get 1 year as long as you can show those. Portugal, without going the $500,000 golden visa route, you can go the D8 or D7 route and just get you there. So what the golden visa buys you is automatic, right? Permanent residency and all of the things. So instead of going that route when you're not sure that that's where you want to live, as long as you again can show that you have remote work and generate income doing so, and or have passive income coming in. So not a lot of countries allow for that option. They want to know that you are actually working. So another component to this, the whole webinar would have been too long, but for retired folks that have guaranteed income coming in, Social Security, other things, there are certain countries that are welcoming of folks with that, because you could lose your job. Great, you prove that you have remote work, but then you lose your job and now you're there. So there's a whole host of countries that would prefer 65 plus, or folks that can show guaranteed passive income that would never go away unless you die. Okay, so that's another whole search term that you can put in that would provide a different set of countries. But that wouldn't necessarily be LGBTQ specific. My overall goal with these is super queer friendly, and how can we get in them inexpensively. So again, strong LGBTQ protections. The D8 and the D7 is the easy way to get in, and still, now you're in Europe. Spain, more so the student route for Spain. The digital nomad as well. A lot of countries have the digital nomad. I have clients that it took them just like 6 to 8 weeks, and now they live in Vietnam on a digital nomad visa for, I think they have a year or 2 years. But so a lot of countries are doing digital nomad, but Spain is a good one for a student visa. So again, the short-term language course, top tier LGBTQ protections. They're one of the countries offering asylum to trans folks that are on this list. So top tier LGBTQ protections, and easy student visa options. Malta. So Malta itself, the cost of living is a lot once you're there. But as far as a country goes, and one of the top, European LGBTQ countries, but again, very, very small. So some of the downside of what folks have told me about living in Malta is it is very tight knit. It's a very, very, very small. So it's sort of, everybody kind of knows each other, but inexpensive as far as, the income that you need to show as 42,000 a year gross, not net. And then private health insurance. So low barrier to entry going in, but could be some downsides that once you're there, things cost a lot more, and again, super small community. Taiwan, very progressive Asian country, and the first to legalize marriage equality in 2019. Super safe, super modern, super queer. This one is more of the employment skilled worker gold card. So doctors, lawyers, nurses, a skill of some sort, and one, obviously that Taiwan would be welcoming. And then you could get a residency with that. So at no cost, right? Again, it's about the skill piece. So they're going to benefit from you off the skill. but anywhere from 1 to 3 years, and then tax perks and all of the things based on the salary. Thailand, great option for long tourist visa. And again, student visa, language, courses, super welcoming country, newly recognized marriage equality in 2025, super low cost of living. And again, I have Bangkok there. You can go from Bangkok to beach in one day. So just overall, but again, you're super far. So again, depending on, what you're looking for me, being able to fly somewhere easily is a benefit, but I would love Thailand, Taiwan, and some of these other countries, but for right now, it just doesn't make sense. Albania, one of my favorite. Poor man's French Riviera. Absolutely gorgeous. Nobody knows how beautiful it is. Super, super inexpensive. And again, a bridge. You get a 1-year visa-free stay. Just fly over there. You're there for a year, and then you're right on the Mediterranean. You can fly to Greece, fly to Turkey, look at other countries while you have a year to do so. So definitely, caveat, LGBTQ legal climate is improving. Social acceptance lags, but treat it as a budget bridge. You just take a flight and boom, you're over there, and you have a year in which to do research and explore. All right, mine, Curacao. This is where I'm going. You can open up a gay bar. You're more than welcome to come and hang out. So this is the facade of Curacao. The gays adopted it because of the rainbow facade, I feel like. I have no idea why the gays were like, we love Curacao. But that's what happened about 5 years ago. And now it's a super, super well-known LGBTQ destination. And so it's part of the Dutch islands, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, the ABCs. So you, again, the most LGBTQ friendly Caribbean island, recognizes marriage equality per the Netherlands. So it did not pass marriage equality, but the Netherlands said you have to. So it's 80% Catholic, but the good Catholics, like the ones that wash your feet and like don't throw stones and things like that. So it's, in my opinion, everybody is super, super friendly. 3 cruise ships come in a week. So you have all these gays coming off these cruise ships that want a nice cocktail instead of a Mai Tai. And that's my plan, is to give them a craft cocktail instead of the really sugary, gross Mai Tais. So, and then there's an investment piece. I would go the investor route and buy a bar, buy a building. There's 3 ways in which you can invest, either through their stock market, through the Netherlands. So just literally invest in their stock market, invest in property, land, and the cost of property here is a fraction of what Aruba's is. And if you look at all the tourism statistics, it is what Aruba was 15 years ago. So what $300,000 can buy you in a beachfront property now is the 1.5 million of what Aruba is today. It's Canada's highest beach destination this past year. This is where Canadians are going. So it's seeing a huge uptick in tourism that it's never seen. And so again, property would literally be an investment upon an investment, right? Like Portugal, your investment, it's not going anywhere. It gets you the golden visa. That's what it gets you. But your land 10 years from now is not going to be worth, 10x what you pay for it now. Whereas I view this as an investment upon investment. So in their stock market, in real estate, or in commerce. And so mine would be both real estate and commerce, both open up a business and buy the land. But you don't have to go that route. You can visa free, very low barrier, up to 6 months, see if you like it. And so you can avoid the large upfront investment. I think it's 280,000 for the investment for the way that I'm speaking of, but you could avoid all of that just by using the visitor and preliminary residence piece and avoid all that, see if you like it, and then go from there. Okay. How to choose. So really depends on an amalgamation of what makes up you and or you two as a couple. What are you looking for, right? Do LGBTQ protections matter? This rainbow map put out by ILGA, the International Lesbian, Gay, Trans, Intersex Association of Travel. Go to ILGA and look at the rainbow map. It'll show you the whole globe and all of the rights that you either have or don't have in certain countries. So really good first place to check. Visa or an option that fits your money flow, right? Your salary from a US employer, pension, fixed income, Social Security, very low pension thresholds in the Uruguay and Panama, skills or portfolio. So where do you fall? And again, I alluded to this earlier. I forgot I had a slide on it, but that the city matters more than the country. Pick queer hubs, right? That you wouldn't necessarily think in the country that you're in. And really be careful about working. Don't, the whole world is up in arms around people working in countries that they're not allowed to work in. So don't move to one of these countries and do just that. So don't gamble with that. Always make sure that if you do need to work physically in the country in which you're going, that you make that a priority as far as which route you go, and that you don't just get there with a tourist visa and then start working. Caveats from an LGBTQ plus perspective: safety and acceptance is key. Again, it's all about your threshold for safety in the world, right? Your knowledge of the privilege that you carry in the world, and being cognizant of the combination of those two along with the country that you're thinking about. Health and medical care, taxes and obligations, exit strategy, always have a fallback, be able to have enough money and able to return. And then all of your paperwork, again, estate planning, visas, proof of legal status, making sure that you have all of those in the cloud and easy access. All right. That is that. Before we move on to Charles v. Salazar, let me stop sharing. Any thoughts, questions?
There's a few questions in the chat. Do you want me to read them or you want to go through them?
They're right here.
They're easy to
Trans-Pacific, Ireland, Spain, the Netherlands, Norway, Canada. Those are the ones that come up right off the top of my head as far as asylum and offering it, and folks, really being able to take advantage of it. Also, what's your opinion on safety of getting first US passport for trans? So you have a window right now, or v. Trump, the case that has we've been dealing with since the inauguration, around the administration saying that passports can only say F or M on them, or their sex assigned at birth rather, and no X and all the things. So there is an injunction. It's been since July 1st, and it is still ongoing. And so, as far as getting a passport, it's for some folks, it's scary to give up the one that they have, not knowing what's going to happen. But you definitely have a window right now that, in my opinion, until I think once it gets to the Supreme Court will remove the injunction and say that this policy is allowed to go into effect until we decide on the merit of the case, because that was what the Supreme Court said before. So I think a concern I have is accessing my medical, such as, yeah. So if it's testosterone, if it's, trans-specific drugs, like choosing a country that has, whether you go the asylum route and or super trans friendly, but in some countries will, if you don't go the asylum route, will want you to have private health insurance, but as long as you have private health insurance, you'll be able to access your prescriptions in the country. So the key is, can the affording of private health care, and if you can, then you will have access to those in whatever country that you go. If not, then making sure that the country is very trans friendly and through government subsidies and, being able to access those. But private health insurance is a concern also for the countries that are accepting you, and to make sure that you have that. Does Curacao citizenship get you EU privileges? Yep. So then you become a Dutch citizen after 5 years. So on the 5th year, you would then transition, become a Dutch citizen, and then have all of the EU privileges that route. Family-specific locations that would be at the top of your list: Mexico, Spain, Ireland, a lot of the same ones. And really, and we talked about this a lot more last time than this time, but language. And especially with family, kids, and schooling. Will you homeschool? Will they go to school? Do you want them to learn the language? I mean, I moved to Canada to Quebec when I was young, and it was FSL, French, language as a second language by fire. I learned it very, very quickly, and I'm so grateful that I'm fluent in French at this point. But I was put in a French school in first grade and just, learned. So, family specific locations, I feel like is hard to answer without knowing more. And also, and raise your hand. And if you want to ask like more specific questions other than just what you can write, you can also do that. What do you foresee in the future for queer people who, well, that's a loaded question. I don't even know which way to go with that. Um, Marriage equality is going to be overturned. Trans folks are going to continue to be on the chopping block, and then it will lead to us little by little. They're starting with sort of the um, easiest, sort of low-hanging fruit in their opinion, as far as to drum up fear in the MAGA community. But everything that they're doing, as far as creating lists and doing all the things, and the legal queer from before was on the shadow docket and the potential new FBI classification of trans folks as nihilistic extreme uh, terrorists, and so extremists. And so we talked a lot about that and what that means. The fact that that's even an option and that that's out there, and that was during Germany, that was LGBTQ folks as well, right? And so it's like, and that was 1939, not too long ago, right? Less than 100 years ago, this really truly happened. And so um, I also believe this is a shift in American history. Sometimes in my news feed, I see a lot of, 4 more years, like we'll just get by, the next election, everything will be fine. And I don't see this being fixed in the next election, which is why there are more and more people looking into a long-term solution elsewhere. I really believe this is a shift in American history, and it will take, the Martin Luther King quote, the arc of moral justice, the arc of universal morals is long and bends towards justice, but it is long, but it bends towards justice. So I feel like we're on that arc. Um, so what do you in terms of trans kids? Yeah, I said those countries that I said earlier. Thank you for that. As far as the health insurance, yeah, Australia. So Australia is weird and good. Like if you have an autism diagnosis and or your kids do, you're not allowed in. It's super far. It just like, but really the super far piece, but like it hasn't come up. I mentioned Canada, and I'm Canadian. I mentioned Canada briefly, but um, asylum for trans folks for Canada is really the only way. Otherwise, you need a letter from an employer now. There's a ban on any non-Canadian purchasing property until 2027. They've really, really shut down as far as, they've been, our easy scapegoat for a long time, and they're both kind of over it. And so yeah, Canada's not really easy unless you're going to get in through an employer with a letter proving that they need you to come to Canada. And even if they do, you wouldn't be able to buy land or anything like that. So Canada is just not an easy option other than asylum. Um, Australia, yeah, far, and some interesting caveats to Australia. Same, so not enter, but as far as children, yeah. Um, the legal queer about the shadow docket and trans folks. Um, and any other questions before we move on to trials? So if we're married, help me with the acronyms.
Assigned female at birth and assigned male at birth.
Okay, but we currently have documents, but the same gender. What would the impact be like when equality gets overturned? So that's less of a concern as whether or not um, the administration is going to be more concerned about the original assigned at birth. So what they're after is assigned at birth and saying that being trans doesn't exist. So as, you know, a male assigned at birth and female assigned at birth, they'll view you as two separate. And then the gender marker changes won't be able, will be go away of being able to change your gender marker. So you'd have to go back to MF and so for there'd be no impact on you in that sense. But for my trans folks that if they say that trans folks don't exist and then that gets undone, then you have two women, let's say, signed at birth in a relationship as opposed to the marriage certificate saying male and female and all of the documents saying male and female once. So less so about marriage equality being overturned and more so around the policy that he created on inauguration day declaring two sexes in this country, male and female only. Do you advise moving money? Yeah, so um, well, so that is a very specific question. So the reason my international estate planning talks were mainly to financial advisors is the two most important people to help make this happen are both from an estate planning perspective and then the financial piece. And so a lot of the financial advisors have no idea about the legalities of the relationships and how we're recognized in these other countries. And so they were looking to me from an estate planning perspective. I looked to them about whether your IRA is the best place to remove funds, but they would look at you holistically, see what you have, and then do a cost benefit from there. But to your point, incur penalty taxes, is it worth it just to have a cushion? Maybe not, right? Depends what country you're looking at. What is the cost of living? So that is such a specific Becky question that depends on an analysis of all the assets that make up Becky and then go from there and decide obviously on the path of least penalty and taxes in order to have a cushion. And again, what size of cushion do you need? Where are you going? All of the things. So very, very specific as to you, but very good question. I think I got them all. Did I miss any? Or any additional one? Oh, so yeah, Chris, sorry.
Hey, girl.
Hey.
So I would just wanted you to potentially elaborate a little more for me in my little Australian question there. And maybe me elaborate a little bit too. Last month, my now wife and I actually got married in Australia. My best friend, her wife lived there. They have dual citizenship, blah, blah, blah. So we were chatting while we were even there about the potential of us moving there because of what they're hearing, even of what's going on over here and whatnot. They already did some homework themselves. As sounds like a lot of what you're suggesting here in this webinar is very similar to the homework they seem to have already looked into for us. They also looked at it as the fact that we got married in Australia and our license is Australia would be a bit more of a benefit to helping us move there. Even though we're not sure what route, whether it be a sponsorship or any of that, to move forward. But now me asking you, and if I heard you right, you were saying a diagnosis of autism is like an insta no.
For children.
Okay.
The one couple, the family. So I was asked a question about family specific countries, and it's in one that a lot of folks look at because English language speaking. And so New Zealand, Australia, Ireland, like some of these where you don't have a language barrier, it's super easy. So a lot of folks tend to look at them. And there was one family where because of the child's diagnosis, they were not accepted. So again, other countries want, they do an assessment on, will this person be a drain on our economy, let's say, and right. So, but Australia or New Zealand also, for folks that were asking about trans friendly countries, New Zealand is also an awesome
Right.
one for that. So, yeah, so not sure about adults. I just have one experience with one family. There could have been other confounding, diagnoses that went into that denial, but it was definitely, they were not able to proceed because of the medical issues that this child had. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yep.
So, and for all of these countries, when it gets time to really look into a country and then the facts specific as to you, an immigration attorney in that country. Avoid these companies that help facilitate visas. The majority of them are scams. All my immigration attorney friends have said so. But
We actually intended to potentially talk to an immigration attorney. So I'm glad you're saying that. I didn't think that would be your expertise, so I didn't know about consulting
yeah,
you
no,
on that.
all I can know is what I
But
research and what they know, but you need, if you're curious about Spain, you need an immigration attorney in Spain, Portugal, Australia,
we
an
should be
immigration
talking to one in Australia,
in
not an
Australia.
immigration attorney here.
Exactly. No, everybody's reaching out to me, asking me immigration questions like this, but and then what I do is I ask my immigration lawyer, who do you recommend in this country? Like I have a list of attorneys in different countries that I recommend. I can ask about Australia and,
Please.
yeah, shoot me a text and I'll let you know who he recommends. But so again, yeah, Ricky, I met him in college. He's been doing immigration his whole career. It's what he does. He's an amazing immigration attorney, and so by default, he has colleagues all over the world. So I trust
Perfect.
him with recommendations.
Thank you.
Um, the scam immigration companies, I see a lot of those online. It's hard to tell who's legit. Yeah, it really it is. On Outfest the other day. Oh, kitty cat. On Outfest the other day, I had someone come up to me and I had her send me, she was asking about whether or not the company that she's talking to in Spain, again, the laws are changing on 1022. And they're like, we can get you in before 1022. And it's like a week away. And I'm like, eh. And like on some of the links she was clicking would go to a 404, like unknown. And I'm like, doesn't really instill confidence. And then I emailed that to Ricky and he was like, never heard of them. And so it is hard to tell, but again, and never thought I'd ever say this sentence out loud, but go to Reddit and look into the comments because people will give real life experiences with these companies. So sometimes you have to do a deep, deep, deep dive on some of these companies. And yeah, a lot of it has to do with the gut that you get, when you're communicating with them, how they communicate, the grammar, the sentences, just all it's really hard. But um, an immigration attorney is the way to go. Like there's shouldn't be, any other sort of more inexpensive, route you could potentially get scammed. Um, I noticed a couple of the questions you mentioned needing health insurance. I'm guessing that means something local. No, private insurance. Someone put an example. I didn't even think to research for an example, but Blue Cross, Blue Shield, International Health Insurance, because you're getting covered as a U.S. citizen living there. So they want you to have private health insurance that covers you for being there. Um, then if you become a permanent resident or a citizen or whatever, then you can have access to those local, the same health insurance programs that everybody else does. But while you're in this process, you would have private health insurance through one of our companies that covers folks internationally for extended stays. Okay. It's not inexpensive. – Always a scam if they tell you they have immigration. Good to know. Okay. Any other questions about this? I can go into Childs v. Salazar, and I won't be offended if you drop off. um, let's see. I think this is it. Yeah. All right. So who's who? So Kaylee Childs is the petitioner. She's a therapist, and she petitioned all the way up to the Supreme Court. She is a licensed therapist represented by the Alliance Defending Freedom nonprofit, also deemed a hate group by Southern Poverty Law Center, which gave us the bakery case. They are responsible for overturning Roe v. Wade. They represent, just all of the worst things. So they're representing Childs and challenging Colorado's ban on conversion therapy for minors. Now, Jason Salazar is just the name of the Colorado state official, so not important, but basically Salazar is Colorado, right? So it's Childs v. Colorado, and Childs is challenging the law, and Colorado has to defend it. So the oral arguments were on October 7th. Okay, so the oral arguments told us a lot. And Colorado is defending its statute, and Childs is asking SCOTUS to strike down the law on First Amendment grounds. So again, Alliance Defending Freedom, the Masterpiece Cake Shop, also the 303 Creative case, where the web designer refused to create a wedding registry website. So it was the first time that in commerce, someone could say, I don't want to work with this person because of LGBTQ things. And then Roe v. Wade. So what's super interesting about this case is Colorado is saying that they are regulating professional conduct, that the therapist is in conversion therapy, they are a professional and their conduct is that of conversion therapy. And they are regulating that type of professional conduct because as a state, the government needs to protect its people, right? The minor children from conversion therapy. It has an interest in protecting its people from this type of conduct. She is saying that they are banning and ultimately restricting her speech. That at a macro level, she is speaking. It's talk therapy. She's speaking. The result of that and the end goal of the therapy is converting, but that at the end of the day, the goal is, or what this law is doing is preventing her from being able to say any words. Okay, so it's whether or not Colorado is correct that we're regulating professional conduct that is medically harmful, or the type of therapy, in her ability to do said therapy and speak it, she's no longer allowed, and so therefore she's being restricted, her First Amendment unconstitutional restriction on speech. So the oral arguments completely point to the Supreme Court is poised to overturn this statute and ultimately reverse the bans on conversion therapy. So Alito, in one of the questions, I don't understand how you can square your interpretation with the plain meaning of this statute. So he's asking the Colorado Solicitor General. And Colorado just kept saying, the law only regulates treatment conduct, not speech. And he said, I don't see how you can say that. Practice or treatment that seeks to change sexual orientation, that is talking. That is talking. And then why that hurts Colorado, he literally said, come on, the plain words of your statute cover speech. How can you pretend it doesn't? And that shows he thinks Colorado is ultimately restricting speech. Justice Thomas, at what point, please tell me, Colorado, where does it transform from speech, protected or otherwise, to conduct that you then get to regulate? Colorado argues that when professionals speak in a clinical setting, that speech is professional conduct. That being in the four walls of the therapy room is what transformed the speech into professional conduct, being in that therapeutic setting, being a licensed professional. That's where the transformation occurs, and that's why they're allowed to say you can't do that in those four walls, within the confines of those four walls. You're not allowed to, but then it's still speech. So Thomas skeptical that speech magically loses its First Amendment protection because it's in therapy. Okay. If the same words were protected outside the office, why not here? Gorsuch, you said states can regulate even in the absence of medical consensus. Isn't that right? Colorado admitted that even if a medical expert disagreed about conversion therapy, the state could still ban it. The Gorsuch signaling. So you can censor one viewpoint even when experts don't agree that it's harmful. You're choosing to censor conversion therapy. You are highlighting conversion therapy, even though other experts could say something else is harmful or not harmful, and admitted even if medical experts disagree about conversion therapy, the state could still ban it. So ultimately, it sounds like viewpoint discrimination, which then triggers strict scrutiny. So that's the three levels of scrutiny that the Supreme Court needs to needs to assess this case. So when a government has a law, it's either rational basis. Think of rational basis being like the stepping onto a sidewalk. Very easy. Rational basis, just boom, you that itty bitty little sidewalk, about 4 inches, step over it, step onto it. Then intermediate scrutiny is like college hurdles. They need to show a reason. Strict scrutiny is Olympic level pole vaulting. The government really needs to show that there is a need for this law. So this signals that they're going to use strict scrutiny, make Colorado pole vault over the largest, really show and explain how it's not viewpoint discrimination towards the viewpoint of conversion therapy. And then Kavanaugh, and this is one of the biggest. There is zero example of this type of prior restraint in any other setting. No history, no tradition. So Kavanaugh's calling Colorado's law a prior restraint, preventing therapists from speaking certain views before they even open their mouth. It's basically saying this is preemptive censorship and has no historical analog, therefore unconstitutional. I mean, he was very, very, very blunt that this puts him squarely in Charles's corner. Zero historical example of having done this previously. So we have the main ones. If nothing else, we have these. And then Amy Coney Barrett, of course, even though she didn't have very sort of egregious quotes that came out of the oral arguments, all hostile towards Colorado, only asked questions to Colorado. Underlying concern for Alito is that the statute bans speech on its face. Professional speech is dubious. What makes it professional? Just because you're in the in the therapy room. Regulating without medical consensus, viewpoint bias, and then no one's ever done this before in any other type of viewpoint. So likely outcome, bottom line, I think the Supreme Court overturns the Colorado law, 5-4, 6-3, either way, depending on how Amy Coney Barrett goes, but we have these four. But 5-4, 6-3 in favor of Childs. Roberts, Kavanaugh, Barrett nudging a narrower ruling, and rather than a broad invalidation of all professional speech limits. So we'll see exactly where this goes. So most likely, in my opinion, the court holds that Colorado's law is content and viewpoint based, requires strict scrutiny, vacates it to the lower court, and has the legislation rewrite it. If you want to ban conversion therapy, find a different way to do it. But that the law on its face restricts speech, and so will not stand. And then the practical effect either way, there are bans in 20 states. including Jersey, New York, over 20 states have bans, and then expect challenges to all of those. And they'll need to be rewritten, and we'll figure out what we need to do from there. One thing that turning lemons into lemonade here that I find helps us is that there's also the Department of Health and Human Services has attacked gender affirming care, right? And whistleblowers and people that provide gender affirming care, and a lot of therapy practices where they focus on LGBTQ folks and talk about LGBTQ issues and transitioning and all the things. This was about 4 or 5 months ago that whistleblower policy came out, and they were worried that someone was going to report them, and that then they contacted their malpractice liability. What should I do, right? And what was difficult was that it said medical provider, and within multiple government agencies, when I did research, therapists were considered a medical provider in some of the agencies. Not all definitions of a medical provider for different federal agencies, be it the VA, be it every agency has different definitions. It shouldn't, but it does, right? So just the haphazardness of the federal government made it so that a therapist very well could have been included in a medical provider. So if the ability to speak conversion therapy inside of a therapeutic setting is now protected speech, so would providing gender affirming therapy in a therapeutic setting. And so all of the therapists that were reaching out 4 to 5 months ago that were very afraid, and some changed their websites and the verbiage on their website, removing some of the LGBTQ specific affirming care, but it was therapy, it was speaking. Support groups, online support groups, speaking, all of the things that if it's protected there, it's protected for us as well, as far as LGBTQ specific therapy. Let's see. Yeah. Connected with Android Outfest and sent a follow-up email to create a professional will as a therapist. Yeah. And as a therapist, the sound, yeah. I mean, it's defunct science. It's debunked science. There's actually over 1,100 and I want to say 41 Republican-based organizations that refute conversion therapy. This isn't a political thing. This is pure science and harm and lifelong impact on folks. It's truly, yeah. And again, it will lead people to, and one of the biggest things, and where I have yet to come up with an answer to this, is I don't know how they square, he talks about how do you square that with the interpretation of the statute. How do you square the fact that the people receiving conversion therapy never consented? They're minors. Like, how about that? And yeah, Jen, my wife, is sent to conversion therapy camp, and that's another thing. So I was asked about detainment, right? A lot of conversion therapy actually happens in long-term settings like summer camp, which is, I have chills, another form of detainment, right? They don't have a choice. They are a minor. They have to do this thing. How that isn't, a factor here at all, that for this whole ban, all these bans are only for minors. And so how does that not rise and raise the fact that, yes, someone has a right to speech, but then doesn't someone have a right to consent to listen to what you have to say? Right? As an adult, I would walk out of the room if I didn't like what you were saying. I'd have agency. I'd have all of the things, but these kids don't have that. And then if it's like Jen's wife, who got sent somewhere for 2 months, 3 months, that's detainment. She didn't want to go. Right? So, and the opinion will be released in June for Pride Month, because that's what they like to do, is give us these opinions during Pride Month. But so oral arguments, like I said, they just happen on October 7th. We won't hear anything else until the opinion is released sometime in June. Let me see if there are any other questions. All right. And so Jen confirmed this was recorded. So we did record. I turned lemons into lemonade, honestly. You know, it was good to do it again. Over 250 people registered for it, despite the 50 or so that attended on a Sunday. Thank you all for those who did attend. I also, like I said, I have the documentation that I put together about intentional communities, as well as a little bit of a deep dive on low-cost language study route. These were the two most interesting, inexpensive budget, where you get to pick whatever country you want and kind of go in a cool way. I'd go in an intentional community way, but I'm also extroverted. Some people that may sound horrendous too. So I'm like, yay, we got a community, but again, it's all about how, what works best for you. But so the recording will be on the YouTube channel. If you're not already, go and subscribe to that. That's where we're uploading all of the content, because Tuesdays at noon is not always feasible for people to join. And then the next legal Q&A is the 28th. And then we'll also, in the email, we'll include the Google, a Google Doc, Jen, with all of the actual resources stuff, and the slides so the email will have the slides and, all of the PowerPoint slides, as well as these resources, but then the recording itself will be on YouTube, and a link to it in the email. So, all right. Lovely to see you all. Happy Sunday. High five. Come here, buddy. Say bye. Oh my goodness. Bye, guys. Bye, Joe. Bye. Bye, Jen.